let's finish our skeleton. So after we're done with our base skeleton, we can then go in and add controls just to make it more convenient to select between our control rig. And then we can learn how to clean up the cat rig and get it ready for an animator's use. So let's go ahead and continue where we left off. We'll grab our pelvis hub and we'll create a spine. Let's now start to move this in place. Grabbing the chest hub, we'll bring that up and over. Then we can start to adjust the size in order for this to match more accurately to our creature's volume. Feel free to go in and add an editable poly and start to tweak that, but I don't think it's necessary here. Okay, so once we're done with this, I would then like to go in and add a change to the spine bones themselves. You have a few choices here. You could always go ahead and tweak the scale of 1, copy that change, and then paste that down the rest of the vertebrae. Or if you'd like, you can select them all and scale them simultaneously. Whichever you find saves you time, that's the direction to take. Alright, great. So that brings us now to our head rig. Now keep in mind there is no add head feature, but we do have an add spine tool, and that's what we would use for the head. And take a look, I mean, the flexibility here is going to be exactly what we need. Get some very nice neck twists. So that will look well once it's time to skin. Alright, let's go ahead and move this in place. So I'll first go ahead and translate it down. I'll enable the angle snap tool and then rotate this down in the z-axis to about 90 degrees. And this is just to keep the orientation clean, so it's not at an angle or anything like that. Now we can start to move this forward. Head over to one of our orthographic views, let's say our left view, just to resize this. Make sure that it does fit nicely within our creature's head mesh. So let's say that will work out well. Let's go ahead and just double check things from our perspective view. I'll go ahead and scale this out in the z-axis just a little bit more to add more width. And that will work out just fine. Now for the neck, again, same as with the spine, we could always go in and select them all and bring these out in the z-axis. Perfect. Alright, so we're good to go for our head rig. Let's go ahead and test this out before we move to the arms to finish up. So you can see, alright, we're going to get some really nice neck behavior. Now keep in mind that, yes, as we rotate the head, we don't quite have independent control here. So we move the head, the neck will naturally follow. But what if we wanted to add an offset to the head alone? How could we do that? It's just a matter of adding a bone. So I'd go in and add that. We could always scale this out a bit more, resizing it. Then at that point, once we're satisfied with its size, go back to the scale tool here and tweak this a little bit more. But yes, so once we're satisfied with the size of this, I mean, we can then go ahead and just make sure to skin to this object. We may not skin to this. Instead, we may use this as a control object that we would use to transform the neck. Well, adding a control to this object, so we have that independent control we would need for the creature's head. So you have that choice. But in our case, I don't think that's needed at all, so I'd like to just go ahead and remove that extra bone. But I did want to point that out to you. If you don't quite like where you're going with the neck and head rig, the way it's built into the CAT system, simply just go ahead and add an extra bone and use that for your head control if you'd like. All right, let's move to the arms. So we'd want to grab our chest hub, choose the Add Arm tool. You can see it favors the M pose, so that will work out well for our creature. Let's go to the wrist and start to tweak this. I'll move this over, grab the elbow, do the same so it fits well inside of our creature. Not worried about scale just yet, just making sure that the placement is accurate for each of these bone objects. We'll go to the clavicle next and start to tweak that, bringing that forward. All right, great. Remember to always keep in mind your topology just to make sure that this is placed properly. All right, so at this point, I'd like to go back to the wrist. Let's go ahead and take a look at this in shaded mode. What we want to do here is rotate it down, keeping angle snap enabled. So I'll just bring this down -30 degrees. And you can see that there's a slight twist in our creature's wrist, but I don't think that that would justify adding a twist to our wrist bone. I think that it's subtle enough where we can just go ahead and leave the orientation very clean on this object, having it just point forward here instead of at an angle. Now, if that was more noticeable, then at that point you may consider adjusting the wrist even further to match the orientation of the creature that you're rigging. But in our case, I think it's going to work out well just to leave the orientation as is, and we can then go in and resize our wrist bone. Let's do the same thing for the forearm. I'll go ahead and adjust this in the Y and Z, and do the same thing for our upper arm. Oh, Y and Z. Let's make sure that those two axes are tweaked, and only those two. And then I'll do the same thing for the clavicle. Now, a really neat feature I really love about the cat rig is the forearm twist solution that it provides. It's very fast to set up. So in order to do this, it's just a matter of increasing this bone segments. So right now we only have just one segment here, but what happens if we were to increase this value here? I'm going to set this to 4. And now you'll see that it's already built in. It's already set up for us. No need to add expressions or wire any parameters to get this behavior. So that saves us a ton of time. And we can always copy and paste these changes. So let me go ahead and show you this. I'll go ahead and select one of the forearm bones, and I'll go ahead and set the segment back to 1. Now let's say if we accidentally forgot to add a forearm twist rig, and we already copied our changes over to the right side. Let's say we go to our chest hub and we choose Add Arm to mirror this. Well, if we decide later to go in and add the forearm rig, so increasing the subdivision count on this bone to 4, we could always go to our clavicle, copy all of the changes of this system, and then go ahead and paste that on the opposite side. And what you'll see is that all of the changes are saved. Now scrolling up to the top here, I just need to make sure that we do copy the change from the entire system, so we'd want to make sure that we're under our limb setup when we do that. So now when we paste, notice there's the forearm rig. Alright, beautiful. Alright, great. So things are looking very well. We'd like to show you that edit poly trick on the upper arm. I think it's going to be very useful here. So with it selected, I'll just go in, find the modifier. I'll press the E key to find it a little bit faster. And now we can go in, we can go to the edge subobject. And by the way, this technique is one of the techniques that Rick Vicens covers in his tutorial, so I would highly recommend you taking a look at that since he goes a little bit more in depth into it. But it's just a matter of going in, selecting one of our edges. We can now go to our ribbon tool. Underneath loops, you'll find the insert tool just to add a quick edge loop to this. And then we could always go ahead and bring this out a bit more, scaling out the edges here. Now, if we were to go in and copy this change, go to our clavicle on the opposite side and choose paste, you'll notice that the edit poly does not get transferred over. No worries. Well, it's just a matter of grabbing the modifier and dragging that over to the next object that we would like to have that shape tied to. All right, beautiful. So our rig is coming together very well. We can go ahead and work on the fingers. Let's go ahead and start this process. You can see that, all right, we have this add bone tool. We could always use that. I'll just go to wireframe mode, grab the bone object, and start to move this down in place. So I'll go to our move tool, start to just move this down, move it over, start to reorient this. Then once we choose add bone again, you can see that we're starting to get the segments we need for our finger rig. However, keep in mind that this is, again, pretty limited, and we don't have hand presets that we can work with to quickly animate the hands. So this is just as if we were to work with a normal bone object. Also, keep in mind that if we were to reposition these, that we don't quite get the stretching behavior we would see on the rest of the rig. So that's why I like to work with digits unless we have to work with these extra bone objects using the add bone tool. So I'll just go ahead and double click to select this hierarchy and delete. Now we could go in and add some digits here. So we have a total of 4 fingers. We could go ahead and work on tweaking one and then copying and pasting those changes. So let's do that. Now keep in mind that we need to make sure that the metacarpal is placed properly in order for the fingers to deform accurately. So that means is that we'd want to place the pivot of our index root a bit more higher up. If you take a look at your hand and bend your index finger, you can see that the rotation happens a bit higher up than what you might expect to find on a control rig that doesn't have the finger placed accurately. So that's just something to be very careful about. I'll go ahead and turn off angle snap, and I'll just go ahead and start to tweak this a little bit more. Let's go to the next bone and start to rotate that. Also, keep in mind that when we double click and start to rotate, we get this additive rotation behavior in our chain, and that might help to reorient the rest of the finger a little bit faster. That's also another limitation of the add bone tool. When we double click and try to rotate, we won't get that behavior. Alright, so I'll now start to just kind of move this in place. I'll go to the next bone and do the same. And then for this last bone here, we'd want to use the length parameter to make sure that that matches to the finger geometry. And I think that's going to work out well. So now we could go ahead and copy these changes and paste. Now it's just a matter of reorienting this and bringing this up a little bit higher. And what I'll do is double click to grab the entire chain because the entire chain needs to be brought up. Move that over, and that will work out very well. So let's do the same thing again for the pinky. Let's go ahead and paste our changes. Let's bring up the entire chain. Let's start to now reorient it. Just about done. If you find that your manipulator isn't working too well, just go ahead and deselect and then reselect the object. Sometimes that happens when working on cat rigs, but that's nothing to be concerned about at all. Alright, so this is looking really nice. I'll do the same thing for the thumb. I'll just go ahead and paste the changes here. You can see that we need to reorient the root. No worries, I'll just go ahead and rotate that around. Double click. We'll go ahead and move this in place. Bring this back in the Z-axis. And now we can go ahead and just start tweaking the root here to make sure that this is placed properly for some natural thumb deformations. I'll go ahead and double click on the next bone so we can go ahead and grab the entire chain and start moving that over and in place. Great. And now just selecting one, so I'll just go ahead and rotate that over, translate it in, and then make a quick tweak to the last bone here to finish up. Beautiful. Alright, so watch this. When we go in, we can always copy our changes, paste, and automatically the fingers are set up. Great, well, we have finished our cat skeleton. So what is next? Well, always remember that you'd want to go in and adjust your naming conventions as we have done for the legs. So keep that in mind, but at this point, we'd be ready to go in and add controls wherever necessary. So let's go ahead and learn how to do just that in the next lesson.